Hey y'all, how's it going? Welcome back to Seed to Fleet channel. My name is Brooke, and you might hear some background noise in today's video, and that is because our neighbor has an 8-foot tall skeleton. It's October, and it talks. It's like motion detected. So I'm gonna try and get through this video. I'm really hoping you can hear mostly me, but if you hear something creepy in the background, I feel like it just adds to the festivities, you know? So today we're going to be doing a fall garden tour, and I'm really excited to show you what I've been up to in the garden. There's some places that are still kind of in transition. There's some places that are looking nice and full. So grab a cup of coffee, grab some tea, grab an adult beverage, grab whatever you think is going to satisfy your garden tour video time, and let's do this. So I actually want to start in the orchard. So the trees are looking really good. Now that the weather's cooled down, they have put on a lot of new growth. This tree is blowing my mind. This was a rooted cutting that I actually had from a couple of years ago for my community garden. So this tree I rooted from a branch of an old peach tree a couple of years ago. And with all the new growth, with some good care, it's probably around 4 feet tall. I'm 5 feet tall. I'm actually really short. I'm a tiny human. And it's getting really tall. So I'm super excited. I'm really hoping it puts off a couple of fruit next year. I don't actually know the variety because it was from the community garden, but the new growth on these trees is really good. And I think one of the contributing factors is I got on a better fertilizer schedule. So I started giving them fertilizer and giving them water a lot more frequently, especially while we've been having the drought. And for the peaches, I was just using like an all-purpose balanced fertilizer for fruit trees. But then for the citrus, this is my Persian lime tree, and this tree is also growing a lot. So the citrus trees have been putting on a ton of amazing growth, which is really good, except my key lime isn't, but that's fine. But the citrus trees look amazing. I'm really happy. They were struggling this summer. And so the orchard is looking really good. Pretty soon when the leaves fall off of my peach trees, I am going to have to do a little bit of maintenance to those, which I'll do a video about. I was talking to somebody at my local garden center, and you have to spray a fungicide onto peaches after they drop all of their leaves. And that usually happens around like December time frame. So keep an eye out for some orchard maintenance videos, but I want to show you something very important. So about a week ago today, I lost my grandfather. Well, I didn't lose him. I know exactly where he is, but he passed. And it was a long time coming. He had had dementia pretty bad for a while, and he had taken quite a few falls, and he was being cared for amazingly by my grandmother and my mom and a caretaker and like a team of people that were helping care for him. Yeah, his last day with us was a week ago. And so I was having a sad girl garden time, not intending to do this, but I was having sad girl garden time, and I was looking at all these trees that they had for sale at my favorite garden center, and they had a orange tree called a Republic of Texas orange. Now, let me tell you why that is so significant for my grandfather. So my grandfather was actually born and raised in Alabama and Arkansas. And he moved to California when he was very young. Loved oranges, just loved them. And then they moved to Texas, and Texas was his second love. So I felt like a Republic of Texas orange tree was a very good addition in memory of him in my garden. He was a very special person in my life. We were very close. I'm almost 30 years old, and I got to have him for most of my life, and he was a big part of my life. So I was very sad, obviously, much calmer now. But yeah, he'll always be with me, and in this orange tree, and hopefully it will be very fruitful. So won't spend too much time on that, or I might cry. Moving on. Another thing that's new is this composting system. So I'm doing a whole video on this composting system, but I really want this area to transform here this winter and spring. So we will see what happens with that. I feel like Texas is so weird for a lot of reasons, but I feel like in the fall, people are kind of watching things go into dormancy. And really, fall for us here in Texas is where we're watching things like take off. So the way I kind of organized the beds for this season was that I put stuff in the middle, but I didn't want to monoculture it. So I didn't want to put I have broccoli next to each other over there, which I'll show you in a minute, but got a lot of different stuff. I really wanted to kind of lean into the beauty of the different textures of the fall garden, and having different things close to each other. So I've got stuff like Chinese cabbage, I have Swiss chard, I have broccoli, and then along the trellis we have some pole beans. And then I also supplemented with some fun starts. So in this bed we've got stuff like purple cauliflower, cheddar cauliflower. So I really wanted to just kind of lean into some funner stuff that I've never grown before. And then I have a big blank space in this bed, and I tried to plant some teddy bear sunflowers, but they seem not to want to cooperate. So teddy bear sunflowers usually are a little bit of a longer producing sunflower, so we'll see if they come up, and if we actually get any teddy bear sunflowers, it probably won't be till December, or maybe even early January, and we might not have the weather for it anymore, but you know what? It's Texas, weirder weather has happened. So one bed I'm really excited about is this one. I'm growing some different stuff in this bed that I've never done before. I have some little celery plants, I have some pink celery, and one thing I'm finding very interesting is celery actually grows decent in shaded conditions in hot climates. So some of these celery plants are being hidden under here by this cabbage plant, and they are like miles healthier. It's wild than some of these really small ones. And then over here, I'm growing some stuff I've never grown before. These are leeks, and then I have one fennel plant. And again, never something I've grown before. I actually intended to start them from seeds, and I totally forgot, which is why I now had to buy some starts. But super excited about that. And then the rest of this blank space, I actually planted spinach because we absolutely love spinach. One of my biggest goals for this season is actually to make my own greens powder. And that's because I drink a smoothie almost every day. And I would love to be able to drink a smoothie with dehydrated greens powder that's from my own garden for like a whole year. Don't know if I'm going to be able to do that, but we'll see. So these two beds really have the same thing going on. Lots of cabbage, there's broccoli, there is cauliflower, basically all of your brassicas, also with some flowers mixed in there. And also I'm discovering the zinnias that I planted must have all been queen lime zinnias because they are all lime green, which like not sure about that color palette for the fall, but that's what July Brook did. So we just need to thank July Brook for doing anything at this point, you know? Okay, y'all, so this is a bed that's been sitting here since we moved in the spring. And this metal bed I got for a promo for a company that I'm not super excited about anymore. If you want metal raised beds, I would heavily advise going and getting the Birdies raised beds. I think those can only be ordered through Epic Gardening, I think, but this is not a Birdies bed. So that's all I'm going to say about that. So if you want a metal raised bed, this one's pretty cool. So I have been filling this bed with grass clippings and sticks from like things we've cut off the trees on the property, and that's really what I've been doing. And then I finally just filled it with compost. So I got some really good high quality compost, and it only took about 5 bags to finish filling it. And this is going to be lettuce. So a bunch of the lettuce has already germinated and it's already starting to grow lettuce. And lettuce here is a winter crop. So this will be super easy to cover when it actually frosts. But it's all just starting to germinate. Let me show you. And I just put a bunch of different types of lettuces in here along with arugula. And I mean, I just sprinkled them very liberally. And for the first couple of days, I came out here and I watered every single day. So I'm really excited about having a bunch of fresh lettuce because homegrown lettuce, guys, is so good. Like, so good. Now, one of my other sad girl purchases, along with the orange tree, was this bay leaf bush. I'm really pumped about the bay leaf bush. I need to put some mulch around it, but really excited about it because I love cooking with bay leaves. I make a lot of soup in the winter, and bay leaves are one of kind of my favorite ingredients. I also use bay leaves a lot in my homemade chicken and beef stock that we use to cook rice and
all kinds of good stuff. So I am extremely excited about the bay leaf bush. And then the other thing I've done is I trimmed my blackberries. So I think I lost a couple of my blackberries, which is expected. We had a super hot summer, and quite frankly, I didn't have the infrastructure I probably needed. One of the projects I'm hoping to do in the spring is to get better infrastructure for the blackberries. Now, when I say infrastructure, I don't necessarily mean support for the blackberries. I mean, I need to lay down some cardboard, get some mulch up in here, and make sure that the water that's going there is really staying, because along this back fence, we're actually on a little bit of a slope. So the water really like runs down and it doesn't actually stay where it needs to stay. So this area will be undergoing a little bit of a transformation, just to better support those blackberry vines. So now, there's something very special happening along the back fence, and I'm making a whole video about it that's not going to be out till December, okay? But to give you a little bit of a preview, I am trialing the timing of some flowers. And I think that's all I'm going to tell you for right now, so stay tuned for that video. But moving on to this big bed, now you're going to notice this side looks a little small compared to the other side. And that's because we just harvested some acorn squash out of this side of the bed. It was riddled with squash vine borers. But we got about a dozen acorn squash, which was really exciting. We've already eaten one. They were super tasty. So I'm kind of more motivated to try squash again. I was just reading a study from Clemson University for squash vine borers that said if you actually spray BT along the plants twice a week, even while the squash vine borers are active, that it showed good results. So I'm encouraged. But this side of the bed, I ended up getting a bunch of transplants from a store because I didn't start enough to fill out this side of the bed. And a lot of these are actually like more Asian greens, bok choy, pak choy, mustard greens, and we eat a lot of stir fry because our diet is so rice-based because of my celiac. So I'm really excited about just having a bunch of greens that we can come out here and grab and saute down. I love sauteed greens, like love, love, love. The other thing that's in this bed are some Brussels sprouts. Now, I have a little bit of a funny story about Brussels sprouts, if you will humor me for a second. So the first and only time I tried to grow Brussels sprouts was at my community garden, and I was so proud of myself. I had just gotten my community garden plot. It was my first garden on like a massive scale. This was back in 2018, 19? Somewhere around there. And I was so excited. I planted out like 6 Brussels sprouts. You get them in like a little 6-cell at like Home Depot. I didn't know any better. And I planted them like so close. And so my garden plot neighbor, his name was Paul. Paul was wonderful. He was the same guy that told me he could never figure out how to grow beefsteak tomatoes in Texas. And I grew the best beefsteak tomatoes in Texas he had ever seen. And I was like, wow, thank you so much. So Paul walks up, he didn't even introduce himself, and he just looks at my Brussels sprouts. He goes, those aren't going to form Brussels sprouts. And I was like, okay. And so we chatted, and sure enough, no Brussels sprouts. I planted them way too close together. I planted them at the wrong time. I did not give them any fertilizer. I did not give them enough water, and Paul was right. So now every time I go and look at Brussels sprout plants, and if I get a harvest out of these, my harvest will be dedicated to Mr. Paul, who was quite a wonderful man. I would be the tomato fairy every spring, and I would drop off tomato plants to like some of my friends who were garden plot neighbors, and Paul always got a sunrise bumblebee tomato because those were his absolute favorite. So this side of the bed is slightly more grown in because it was planted earlier, but a lot of what's in here is collard greens. So a lot of collard greens in here, and then I do have a Mexican torch sunflower, which look at that. These are arguably some of my favorite flowers. My grandma got to come over to my house for lunch a few days after my grandpa passed. She hadn't been able to see our new house because of his care, and she came over and she saw these from the window, and she just said, she was like, I've never seen that color before, which is almost the same thing I said when I started growing these. So very excited about these. The monarchs have been loving them on their journey back down to Mexico. So really, really been enjoying having this flower back in the garden. And then we have a little fall tomato experiment growing. I've never done tomatoes in the fall, And admittedly, I'm a bit skeptical just because I know how long tomatoes take to ripen. So yeah, my hopes are low. Well, my hopes are high. My expectations are low. But the other cool thing that I did in this bed, which you can kind of see, I have a rough semblance of rows. And by rough, I mean it's pretty rough. I think every farmer in America would laugh at me if I called this a row. But I did something interesting between the rows. So between the rows, I planted red garlic, and I also planted shallots. And they are just starting to pop up, and I probably planted them, I want to say 3 or 4 weeks ago. I think I put it in my last video, the planting of them. So, really excited to watch those come up. It's kind of my first shot at interplanting between seasons. So obviously all of these plants will be done, at some point before the garlic is ready to harvest, because garlic takes 9 months. I have tried to grow garlic in the past. It hasn't been overly successful, but I also haven't had a garden that's been this close to my living to manage because of the community garden. And then my old backyard garden did not get enough rain in any way, shape, or form. Now, some of my blackberries are coming back. So some of them kind of died back, but then they actually have foliage coming back. So we have broccoli plants in the middle, and then on either side we have bush beans. So lots of green beans. Green beans freeze really, really well, which is why we're growing so many green beans. Now, also in these beds, we have some elephant garlic. So I planted some elephant garlic. There's not that much of it, and it's not popping up quite yet, which makes me a little nervous. I don't like it when I plant stuff and it doesn't pop up in enough time, but that's just kind of gardening, Another interesting thing is this. So these are 2 Japanese eggplants that I actually cut at the base of the eggplant, and they lived, like they came back. And I've harvested, there's a couple of eggplants on here that need to be harvested. That one for sure. So these eggplants are just super healthy looking, and we've been throwing them in stir fries and some curries that we've been having for dinners. But let me just set you up real quick. These eggplant bushes are huge. So, lesson learned. Let my eggplant live through the summer and you will be rewarded with the most beautiful eggplant in the fall. Now, the rest of what's in this bed, we have the eggplant, and then in some of these blank spaces on the inside of this bed is more garlic that's popping up. And then the middle, same thing, are broccoli and then bush beans on the one side. Now, on the inside right here, so on the inside of this bed, there's a few things happening. There's a lot of volunteer zinnias, which I have no idea what color they are, and they're actually not even in the bed. They're in the pathway, but I just want to let them live their best life. So I'm leaving them. But what I'm doing on this side of the bed is I'm actually succession sowing beets. Beets are so healthy and they're so good for you. And I really want to learn how to love them, and I want to learn how to cook them really well. But I also don't need 50 pounds of beets at one time. That's so many beets. And so what I'm doing is I'm working on succession sowing them. So I actually have a spreadsheet that literally once a week I'm sowing beets so that I have a continual harvest. And I'm not only doing this with beets, but I'm also doing this with root crops, which I will show you. Before I show you the root crops though, this is the remnants of this bed from the summer. So there is some Persian basil that smells incredible. And it's also dropped seeds. And so now I have basil growing in my grass, which does a basil lawn really sound that horrible? No, it doesn't. It actually sounds wonderful. But I've left it for the bees. And then we've got a couple of Scotch Bonnet plants. I'm probably going to pull the ones over here. Those don't have very much longer left. But this guy gets to live. Mostly because it's got Scotch bonnets on it, but also because we didn't get any Scotch bonnets. And Cam, my fiance, needs some Scotch bonnets, so we got to do that. So over here you can see all of these rows that I'm succession sowing. So these are things like carrots, turnips, parsnips, rutabaga, radish. It's a lot of different stuff. Some stuff I've grown before, some stuff I haven't. I've never successfully grown carrots. The reason I chose this bed is because the soil is super loose and it's also just a really tall bed, so I feel like they'll have ample space to get down in there. But I'm really excited for succession sowing for a lot of reasons. And the biggest one is that we can be eating fresh out of the garden without necessarily me having to worry about preserving a bunch of stuff. Like I can come out here and grab some greens, grab some root veg, grab whatever's ready, toss it in a pan and make dinner. Like that is in an ideal world how I would really love to garden in the fall. That's not always possible in the summer because everything comes on so hot and heavy. But honestly, that's like the beauty of fall and winter gardening here in the South, is really that like fresh eating out of the garden like every day. And I'm really hoping that with succession sowing, that'll kind of extend that. And then one update that's not necessarily garden related, but it will be applicable because you see my backyard a lot, is this. And that. So we moved all of that rock over there. And the rock is something we pretty much always knew we were going to get rid of when we bought this house. So we pretty much always knew we were going to be getting rid of the rock for a few reasons. The rock is really dark. It radiates heat in the summer. The dogs don't like stepping on it. It's not the most kid-friendly, which is not me saying that we have kids, because we don't, but like we would love to in the next few years while we're living in this house. We bought this house knowing we were going to be here for a long time. And so it's gotta go. Like it is so much rock. It's such an aggressive amount of rocks and we have barely made a dent. And I mean, we've been shoveling, like shovelful by shovelful, like cart by cart, these effing rocks. And so what we're getting really close to is we're getting really close to a point where we're probably going to either put it out there for free on the internet or we're going to pay a landscaping company to come remove it. There's a lot of landscape fabric underneath it, but there's also a lot of grass growing up through it. And it's just not something that I want to have. I mean, no matter how you feel about xeriscaping or hardscaping or rockscaping or whatever you call it, the reality is that if you have xeriscaping in an environment that is supposed to be prairie, native prairie, that's what we have here in Texas. That's like if no houses existed and nothing existed, you would have forest and prairie. To put rocks in a full sun area and expect for it to stay rocks without the weed fabric breaking down with our intense humidity and our rain and without, it's just a nightmare. And unless you're going to nuke it with chemicals, it's just like such a poor choice that I beg of you to not do in the interest of future young homeowners like myself. Because this sucks and I hate it. But what's getting me through is that we're going to have it removed probably before like winter hits, which for us is like late December, early January. It will all be gone before then. Like, mark my words. I don't care how much money I have to pay somebody, and I don't care how much pain in my lower back has to be in for me to get rid of it. It's going to be gone. So with all that being said, it's all going to become grass. And I'm so excited. Like, our dogs were running out here today and they just like do whatever they can to avoid all this rock area because it's so terrible. I mean, Cam even had to get a special like metal grinding tool and learn how to use it so he could get up this like steel edging. So I'm so hoping we have more grass. It's totally going to change the feel of the backyard once this is all grass. And I actually think it might afford the opportunity for not more vegetable garden beds, but I do think it's going to afford the opportunity for maybe some flower beds or maybe some like pretty landscaping that's like pretty. Like, a lot of this first year was about like getting the vegetable beds in and getting that whole process going. And really, now that we're going to be in year 2 next year, I would love to focus on native perennials. I would love to focus on like some more beautiful things, and also some infrastructure. So that is your early fall garden tour. We got 2 eggplant out of the day today, but really with the temperatures where they're at, and October is generally one of our wetter months, I think my late fall garden tour is going to be pretty epic. So thanks so much for watching. Happy gardening, and we'll see you next time.